Hello everyone, I'm Miranda, and today I am going to be talking about the environmental crisis. So, with the extreme divide that has been happening in our country recently, I feel like the term climate change has almost begun to lose its meaning altogether. Debates are happening every single day between citizens and elected officials about whether or not the environmental crisis is real. And if we're stuck at a point where we're just debating about whether or not something exists, we're never going to reach the point where we're debating solutions to the problem. So today I'm here to talk about the environmental crisis that is real and is happening. And before I give you my reasons as to why I believe that the environmental crisis is real, I just want to quickly talk about why it is so important to convince skeptics that it's real and that it's happening. So, like I said before, the second the words environment or climate are spoken, I feel like we all immediately go on defense mode. And whether or not you believe in the environmental crisis, I can almost guarantee that that plays a major role in the way that you vote or the way that you behave in the political realm in general. And politics and the environment are not separate things. In fact, they go hand in hand. Because if we want to address the environmental crisis, we need to elect people who believe in it, and we need to elect people who are willing to fight for environmental legislation. Because at this point, the crisis is just far too advanced to be solved by me or by you. We need our governments and our elected officials to work together to implement legislation that will address it and that will help it. So now that I've rambled a little bit about why politics and the environment go hand in hand, I'm going to give you my reasons as to why I believe that there is in fact an environmental crisis. So my first reason is simply that people around the world have already begun to be impacted by it. I feel like when some people think about the environmental crisis, they think of it as a future problem, as a problem for future generations to deal with, but that really couldn't be farther from the truth. Human beings are already being impacted by it and will continue to be impacted by it unless we do something about it. So according to the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration, climate change is already impacting human health. Changes in weather and climate patterns can put lives at risk. Hurricanes are getting stronger and wetter, which can cause direct and indirect deaths as a result of ocean temperatures rising. Heat is one of the most deadly weather phenomena. Dry conditions are leading to more wildfires, which bring many health risks. Higher incidences of flooding can lead to the spread of waterborne diseases, injuries, and chemical hazards. And as geographic ranges of mosquitoes and ticks expand due to their climate changing, they can carry disease to new locations. If we don't do something about this soon, human beings will continue to be impacted by the environmental crisis. And we will reach a point where something tragic occurs that puts many human lives at risk, and we'll realize, wow, we could have prevented this from happening had we only intervened and done something. So my second argument to why I believe the environmental crisis is real is that corporations have begun to claim that they are eco-friendly as a marketing strategy. And while I'm sure that some corporations are being genuine about being eco-friendly, the sad truth is that corporations are some of the biggest contributors to the environmental crisis. So according to NRDC.org, a recently published report identified that 100 energy companies have been responsible for 71% of all industrial emissions since human-driven climate change was officially recognized. And it's not just the energy sector. According to self-reported numbers, the top 15 U.S. food and beverage companies generate nearly 630 million metric ton of greenhouse gases every single year. That makes this group of only 15 companies a bigger emitter than the entire country of Australia, which is the world's 15th largest source of greenhouse gases. So, if you're able to, I would like you to spend a little bit of time researching which companies are actually sustainable and which companies are using sustainability as a simple marketing strategy and really aren't being sustainable at all. Just be a conscious consumer when you are consuming things from large corporations. Now, my final reason as to why I believe that the environmental crisis is real is that laws regarding climate change and the environmental crisis are starting to be implemented in different countries. So elected officials across the world have begun to take action. but it's not enough. If we want to solve and revert the environmental crisis, everyone needs to be in agreement and implement regulations. Everyone. We can't just have some countries doing it and some countries saying, no, I'm good. We all need to band together and work together to solve this problem, because this isn't just a national crisis. This is an international crisis that will affect everybody. So a good example of a piece of legislation that addresses the environmental crisis is the Inflation Reduction Act. And I'm sure you have heard of the Inflation Reduction Act at some point. And whether or not you like our current president, the Inflation Reduction Act is a good thing. It is probably the most significant piece of climate legislation in the history of the United States. It will deploy nearly $400 billion over the coming decade to slash carbon emissions. And by lowering the cost of clean energy technologies, this law can accelerate their deployment not only at home in our country, but also abroad, which, as I've stated, is really, really important to reverting the environmental crisis. So while I do believe that the environmental crisis is real, of course there are skeptics, and there are a lot of arguments about why they believe the environmental crisis isn't real. A major one being that this has happened before, that it's natural, that it's happened before and we survived and will survive again. And a main argument within that argument is that animals and plants can adapt to the changes in the climate because animals and plants are able to evolve. And this just isn't true, because yes, animals and plants are able to adapt to changing climates, but human-made climate change is occurring at a faster rate than any natural climate change would ever happen. And because of this, plants and animals just simply do not have enough time to adapt to their changing climate. So they will die. And that is my reasons as to why I believe that climate change and the environmental crisis is real. So, like I said, it's real, it's happening right now. This is not a future generation's problem to solve, it's ours. In fact, there really may not be any future generations if we don't start implementing problems, if we don't start implementing solutions. And if we want to save the planet and ourselves with it, we have to intervene and take action against this environmental crisis. In order to do that, the debate surrounding whether or not the environmental crisis is real needs to stop. And the debate around what we can do to solve the environmental crisis needs to start. I urge you to make sure the people you are giving power through elections cares about the environment and is willing to fight for its well-being. So thank you. Have a good night.